Hey, welcome back to the Healthy Living Scottsdale podcast. I'm your host, Coach Zach, and I am joined today in studio by Coach Brandy. And today we are talking about creatine, all about creatine. But before we do that, we want to give a little shout out to a client of the week. And this week's client of the week is
Tatum Anderson.
Tatum's been here, what? Almost a year, maybe?
Not quite.
Year of the summer. Yeah.
Right.
She's done phenomenal.
Yes,
She's doing
she is.
really, really well, and seeing good results. And she was a referral from another member, and then she just got her mom in here.
I know.
This started this week,
Uh-huh.
actually. Not this week by the time you guys are listening to this, but it was really funny because we sent her mom a text message this morning like, hey, how you feeling today? And it was just like sore, exclamation mark, exclamation mark, exclamation mark. So
Yeah, it was great. I trained the two of them this week, and it was great to see that interaction. And they were both like encouraging each other and just very supportive of each other. And Tatum actually mentioned she's really kind of been pretty active throughout her lifetime, and that's because of her mom. And her mom has been active for most of her life and has kind of taken a little bit of a break and now getting back into it. But I love to see that encouragement and that interaction, and it was great.
love having the family
Yeah.
members, like,
Yes.
keep it in the family.
Yeah.
It's always fun.
And then Tatum is, she's mom, she has young kids, and she's making time in her schedule to ensure that she gets to the gym and works really hard when she's here.
And
It's
also
great.
changing her diet and
Yes.
working with like some nutrition and stuff. So very cool.
Yep.
All right, Brandy, let's talk about creatine.
Okay. I'm excited for this one.
Let's talk all about creatine. So I think it was something that our members asked, right? It was
Yes.
we have a board out there. They asked, where does creatine come into play? Should I take it? Should I not take it? So let's break it down for everybody. First off, like, what is creatine?
Yeah, so creatine is a substance that our bodies naturally make. It's made in the liver, the pancreas, and the kidneys. But our body doesn't necessarily make enough, or enough is not stored within the body to have all of the positive benefits or effects that it can potentially have, which is why supplementation or getting creatine through foods, which you can get creatine through foods, is important, because although your body makes it, it doesn't make enough for all of the positive benefits that come from creatine.
And creatine is probably, I know this actually for a fact, I shouldn't say probably, is like the single most studied supplement that exists that's
Yes.
out there.
Yes.
There have been more studies on creatine than any other like amino or
Yes.
supplement.
Thousands of studies.
Yeah, and so it's been studied, immensely and long term, and there really are like no known negative side effects outside of if you take too much and you're not used to it, or depending on the type that you take, which we can get into, it can cause like some bloating.
Right.
Right.
And that can be controlled too in how you take it, like starting off with slower amounts, like the dosage.
Yeah, versus just like
Yeah.
loading up on
Right.
it. But creatine, when I was a teenager, I remember there being kind of this debate about whether it was a steroid or not. And it's not a steroid. It doesn't affect any anabolic or anything with your hormones. But it was like that good, I guess, from like the effects of taking it, that it was like, well, is this a steroid because it's a performance enhancer?
Right.
And it's not, because it's not anabolic, doesn't impact your hormones at all. But that kind of tells you something, right? Of like, okay, well, what am I getting when I like what result am I going to get from supplementing with creatine, right?
Right.
There's a laundry list.
Oh yeah.
So I don't know if you want to just go through and kind of like hit on some benefits of taking creatine.
Yeah, there are many benefits in taking creatine, and emerging research in areas that look to be very promising. So I think one of the main benefits that you'll hear creatine benefits is muscle. So improving how your body takes in creatine. creatine is stored in the muscle tissue. It helps to increase the ATP, or the energy, how muscle uses energy, or how it utilizes energy. So it increases that within the muscle. So it helps your performance in the gym. So
meaning like your endurance can be greater.
Yes, endurance can be greater. You might notice it during resistance training. Maybe you feel like you can lift a little bit more,
or do a couple more reps,
right?
A couple extra reps.
Exactly. And so even speed training. There's been some studies around that too, so it can improve speed training, endurance training, strength training aspects as well.
And this is all because creatine lives in the muscle, and now you have more stored in your muscle tissue because you've supplemented with it. So there's more in there, and meaning that we can do more work at a muscular level. And before we fatigue, right?
Kind
and
of
then we
think
have to
of
replenish.
Exactly. Kind of think of it as like fuel for your muscle. And there's been some studies around bone health as well, and sort of that same idea. Creatine can be used sort of as a fuel source or food source for bone density and improving bone density. And there's been some studies around women in peri and postmenopause, and how creatine supplementation is helping to improve bone density and improve or decrease the possibility of breakage,
as well as muscle loss.
Yes.
So muscle preservation is a major benefit of taking creatine. So this isn't something for like 15-year-old me, right? That's like, is this a steroid? It's not. I just know that it's going to, make me bigger, stronger, faster. But for somebody that's aging, it's like you want this in your corner, right? In your supplement cabinet, because it's going to help prevent muscle loss, muscle wasting, bone loss, as well as there's a lot of research coming out, which I think you hinted at, of like, I don't want to say reversing, but minimizing effects of certain diseases like Parkinson's disease and Alzheimer's disease. And there's some really encouraging things coming out as far as that goes. But creatine also dramatically impacts your cognitive function.
Yes.
It can improve your memory. It can improve your focus. It sounds like we're describing it. It sounds kind of like a super magic pill. But there again, it's so well studied. There are a lot of positive benefits of taking it.
I even heard, and again, there's more studies being done on this, but improvements in immune system improvements, anti-inflammatory impact as well. In terms of brain health, you mentioned memory, cognition, reasoning. So there's been some studies around how it helps to improve reasoning. And then there's a neuroprotection aspect of creatine as well, where it keeps essentially the nerves within the brain, protects the nerves from damage.
Amazing, right?
Yeah.
Amazing. So I think we did a podcast episode, it's been a while now, about like muscle and longevity, right? Like muscle for your health. The more muscle mass you have, like not only the higher quality of life you have, but the lower your mortality rate goes. And since creatine is so strongly related to muscular function, I think it makes sense when we're just thinking about it from like a super high level perspective of like, hey, if I take this thing that's going to positively impact my muscles, that as a result is going to positively impact all these other functions in my body. Right. And so even though, we're just kind of like throwing things out there as far as, oh, it does this, it does this, it does this, it's good for this. It's like, well, that makes sense. When you just kind of like simplify everything, you're like, well, your muscle is really, really important for all the functions in your body. If we do something that's going to be good for our muscles, obviously, it's going to trickle into all these other things.
Yeah, and I think it's important to know too. So if someone is wanting to supplement with creatine, like I think dosage is important. So and I'm referring to creatine monohydrate. So I think that's the creatine monohydrate is the
most
supplement, right? The
Yeah.
most well-studied creatine, and it's fairly inexpensive supplement. So that's good to know as well. So usually like a scoop of creatine monohydrates, either around 3 to 5 grams per scoop. And what the studies have shown is that so it takes about 30 days for your cells to fully absorb that creatine. So within 30 days, you can start to see the impact of that supplementation. Your muscles utilize about 95% of the creatine that you take in. So in order to have like the effects of like the bone impact and the brain impact, studies are showing that a higher dosage may be needed to have those types of improvements. So they're talking around 10 grams of creatine per day versus the 3 to 5 grams of creatine per day to have the muscle and the brain and the bone and the immune system impact of that.
But even 95% uptake and utilization is massive from a supplement standpoint, right?
Yep.
And there's loading. There's kind of like this loading phase of creatine that you can do or you don't have to do, right? A lot of supplement companies recommend this of like, hey, when you start taking creatine, you're going to kind of triple your dosage, I think is like the norm for your first like 2 weeks or something, or maybe 1 week. I'm not an expert in creatine loading, so don't, this isn't advice. But it's like, in order to speed up that 30-day process or shorten it, you load up on creatine to kind of saturate your muscle tissue with it. And then you go to a normal dosage after that as like a maintenance thing. You don't have to do that, right? It's not necessary. You will get the saturation. If you're trying to, if you're just learning about this and you want to go, I don't know, run a marathon or something next week, it's like, okay, maybe you want to load up on it, but there can also be some stomach and bloating issues and things like discomfort that come from that if you're going from 0 to 1,000 right out of the gate, versus like building up slowly like you mentioned.
Right.
Probably better advice.
Yeah, exactly. And then you can take creatine forever.
You should
take it. And people have asked, do I only take it on days when I'm strength training? Do I not take it when I'm not strength training? Take it every day. Just make it part of your like supplementation protocol. And I think there's some myths around creatine, around you'll gain weight with creatine. The creatine is stored within the cells. So within the first 30 days, you may notice like the weight on the scale going up just a little bit. And that's really mostly water retention.
Yeah.
And then after the 30 days, that'll usually dissipate and come back to normal. There have been some studies around fat gain, and because there was some concern, and the results of this study show that there was no long-term impact of like fat gain. In fact, people are usually losing fat mass over time with supplementation of creatine.
Yeah, and I think it depends on the type of creatine that you're taking as well. Monohydrate, which is probably like the most common, right? You shouldn't really see an increase in water weight or water retention from that. But we're, like you touched on, we're talking about like at a cellular level.
Yes.
So
minuscule.
if your cells have more water in them, that's not a bad thing.
That's a good
right?
thing. Yeah.
That's a good thing. When we have like water retention, that's not a good thing. It's extracellular water. It's not intracellular water. Intracellular water meaning inside the cell. You want more fluid in your cell tissue. You don't want more fluid in your outside of the cell within your body. So we're not talking about water retention in a negative way. We're talking about a cellular level. So even if your weight increases a couple couple pounds, that's a healthy increase. It would be the same as an increase in like gaining muscle mass, which we would look at and be like, that's great, right? So it's not a negative thing. If somebody starts this and then they see that, it's like, no, you don't need to really be concerned about that. Because it's not body fat that you're increasing, right? When we're talking about weight loss, we're usually actually thinking, hey, we want to lose body fat, we don't want to lose water and
skeletal muscle mass.
Yeah. So, is there anything else we want people to know, Brandy, outside of the fact that like you should be taking creatine, obviously?
Yeah, I mean, I think we covered most of the benefits. There's a lot of myths out there around creatine. I think people usually when they come to me and asking about creatine, they're afraid it's going to make them bulky.
I don't want to get huge.
Yeah, right. And I've been taking creatine for over 3 years daily, and I don't think I look bulky.
I knew you were bulking up, Brandy. I knew it.
So I think, just dispelling that myth that's not going to happen.
Yeah. No, you guys, for longevity, for vibrant health, like there's, probably if you've been a long time listener of our podcast, like we don't really just go out there and just push supplements on people. We did one recently, a podcast episode recently where we're like, take a multivitamin and then go get your blood work checked and then supplement with anything else that you need. This would be something that it's like safe for just about everybody to add in. There's no reason why you shouldn't. It's also not that expensive. I mean, you can find good quality creatine for a very low price. It's like, why not invest in that, right? Just supplement with it. You can get it in a powder form, which is most common. You can also get it in capsules, which is a little less common, but it's there if for whatever reason you don't want to mix it in. Travel. The one thing that I would caution people is like don't use like flavored powders and stuff, because that's not just pure creatine. It's got other stuff in it. Pure creatine is unflavored. And just the powder itself, you wouldn't like mix in water and drink. Right. You would want to mix it in like a juice or a tea or something because it doesn't taste that great if it's just like plain by itself. Right. So you're going to want to mix it in with something else, but don't go for the flavored stuff that's probably got artificial flavoring and stuff in it. And then you're doing something healthy, but also something unhealthy. So just caution you there.
Right. If you look at the label, the nutrition label, it should be one ingredient.
Yeah, exactly.
Creatine monohydrate.
Yeah, exactly.
That's it.
All right, guys, that's all we got for you. We'll be back next week with more great stuff. Thank you so much for listening to the Healthy Living Scottsdale podcast. Do you have a question that you'd like for us to answer live on the podcast? If so, all you need to do is head over to the Apple Podcast app on your iPhone and do 3 simple things. First, leave us a rating and review telling me what you think of the podcast. In that review, ask anything you want related to health, fitness, or nutrition. And if you want a shout out, leave us your Instagram handle or name. That's all you have to do. Then listen to hear your questions answered live on the next Q&A episode.